Our next guest is Mark Edgington. Mark, unmute yourself. And did I pronounce that name right? Edgington? Is it soft?
You did.
Okay.
I'm surprised, in fact.
Okay. Edgington, and Angela McCardle was going to be here. Is she not coming today, or is she late?
Is my understanding she's on her way.
Okay, great. Mark is...
It's just a minute or two until we're scheduled to be on, so...
Mark, you can tell as a former radio host, you can tell by that voice. I'm not. I'm just an old Southern boy. But Mark is a member of the WSLR Board of Directors. He's also a libertarian.
Do you know how you figure out how a person is native to Sarasota?
I give up.
They'll tell you in the first 5 minutes. I'm a native of Sarasota.
That's true. That's true. I remember the old high school, the old Bayfront, everything. I came here in '93, so I'm a sort of half member.
As far as I'm concerned, that's native. If you've seen the changes, you've been there 30 years. That's as far as I'm concerned, that's enough.
Mark, you're a member of the WSLR Board of Directors. Am I right about that?
This, and I'm proud of it.
Okay. And you're also a libertarian, a former radio host with more than 2 decades of experience in broadcasting. You've co-hosted Free Talk Live, a nationally syndicated program on over 200 stations at one time. You ran for the New Hampshire House as a Republican and a Libertarian in 2024. Your website is markedgington.com.
And I'd point out, I also ran for town moderator of Hudson, and I did, and also, I think it was in 2024 also, and won that one.
Okay, let's talk about criminal reform and so forth.
Let's talk about it. I'll get everybody up to speed.
Sure.
I'm a convicted felon, and I'm not happy about it. It was way back in 1988. I was a place I shouldn't have been, and I was hanging out with people I shouldn't have been hanging out with. And the result, and when a man got killed in Bradenton, Florida, mm-hmm. and I was there. And my worst mistake was when I talked to the cops, I lied. I tried to cover for my friend who had killed a man, and that went very badly. So I ended up spending 8 years in a Florida State prison. So I have a lot of experience in this particular area.
We want to talk about that. It's 8 out of 25. I'd like to hear how you shortened that. It's probably a process you had to go through. So you wrote, as you just said, in one of your columns at markedgington.medium.com, you wrote, at 17 years old, I made a terrible mistake. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And because of that, I spent my 20s behind bars. Formative years, most people spend building careers, relationships, and families. I spent mine learning how to live with myself. And it ends up owning my past doesn't mean excusing it. It means living with it, building from it, and refusing to let it be the only thing that defines me. I like those words. That's a very fine attitude. So tell me how you dealt with prison life, how you got out, and what you've done since. And let's talk about how we can improve the prison system.
I love talking about that particular topic because it's something that's sort of actionable, and everybody wants less crime. There's nobody out there that's like more crime, but there's one side of the political team, right, that likes to vilify the other side of the political team as though that's really the case, and it's absolutely ridiculous. So I say that taking what we are going to call for this purpose bad people, mm-hmm. putting them in a bad place, treating them badly, guarding them with what is generally considered also bad people, at the very least highly cynical people, and then, releasing them on the world as though things are going to be good is naive at best.
Right.
It's a crappy system. And I think that there are better systems, that we can get. Now, will there be mistakes along the way to getting to a better system? I'll bet there are, but there's mistakes now, and we don't, chop the heads off of politicians for that. So I think that's probably where I would like to start.
I wrote down a few of the conditions. I've had guests talk about criminal justice. I've had this program for like 12 years, and they talked about the conditions inside, frequently no air conditioning, crowding, so forth, abuse by the guards, drug availability, video or phone calls, which are hugely expensive and hard to get, remote locations far from the family, which kills your family relationships, frequently there's no access to further education. There's no comp time, inadequate comp time for good behavior. And then we could also talk about cash bail, which I think is a problem, because when I visited the jail here in Sarasota, they said 2/3 of them were there innocent, that is to say, before trial. So there's a lot we could fix about this. And I know you have a couple of favorite organizations here in town. So talk about some of that.
Yep. So first off, one of my favorite organizations, Project 180.
Yes.
They're really great. They help people.
Yeah, they've been on the program twice.
Yeah. They're so great. They help guys who want to make a change. And that's what I believe the criminal justice system should be trying to do.
Yes.
Is trying to bring people to a point where they want to make a change. And you've got a window there when people want to make a change. Because if you keep them incarcerated for, 3 years after the change, maybe 5 years after the change, then it gets harder for them to make the change. You get into this sort of institutionalized cynicism, which is unhealthy. And again, I'm not making excuses for criminal behavior. What I'm trying to say is that there's systems that might work better to limit the amount of criminality that there is in our society. And it's gone way down. We've taken lots of great steps since the 60s and 70s when crime was far more rampant than it is. And I think that there's more steps that can be taken, and that it would be relatively simple, and all sides could reasonable people could agree on many of these steps. I'm not asking for, ridiculous ones, but you talked about comp time or gain time or any variety of these things. And I think it was in the 90s that politicians in Florida decided to get tough on crime. And one of the things they decided to do was to institute an 85% rule, where inmates needed to do 85% of the time that they were sentenced to. And this may on its face sound like a great idea. Lock up bad people, and then we don't have to deal with them. You do have to deal with them, by the way. They're about $60,000 to $80,000 per year to lock up. They cost more than they can make.
Right.
Right. And they don't produce much of anything, by the way. If you think that prison labor is somehow out there doing something productive, you would be mistaken.
Maybe fighting fires in California. That's the only one I could think of.
It's a great one. There's no doubt. I think I support that program. I think it's a good one. I wouldn't hold anyone beyond their end of sentence date to do it.
Of course not.
And I think that there's lots of labor that can replace those guys. But, and nonetheless, I think that's a great program. When these guys are in for 85%, let's say one gets a 10-year sentence. That means that they must do 8.5 years to get out. I think it was a far better system to offer them, up to 5 years, maybe 6 years off their sentences in order to behave properly. Because really, do we want a system that keeps people housed and warehoused, or do we want a system that changes bad behavior? Right. And I hear the arguments on the other side. When people say that it is very difficult to rehabilitate somebody who's never been habilitated, I get it. Well, let's figure out what habilitation looks like, and let's try to do some of that habilitating, because that would be a really effective system.
Why should there be a limit on gain time or comp time you can get off your sentence when you do really good things while you're inside? Why should there be a limit?
I don't see you know what? I don't think that unaccountable legislators know what that limit is, no matter what the limit is. I don't know what the limit is, but I don't think that they do either. As a person who spent, and let's talk about the gain time. For the reason that I didn't do 25 years and a 25-year sentence, the reason that I took a 25-year sentence without taking it to trial was the gain time. The gain time was the whole thing. And then a Republican at the time Charlie Crist,
Right.
he was just a legislator back then. He rode the Donald McDougall train. There was this terrifying man I was incarcerated with at one point named Donald McDougall who killed his stepdaughter, but apparently there was some molestation involved and, all kinds of awful things. This guy his longest sentence was a second-degree murder charge, and the legislators decided they wanted to keep him in no matter whatever they could do. So they began to take game time from everybody who had a second-degree murder charge.
Man.
So, at some point, another guy who had a second-degree murder charge, I don't have all the names in this. I didn't look it up for the purposes of this interview, but a guy paid another guy, and I guess this guy's name was Alba, and I can't remember if that was the first name or last name, but I think it sounds like a last name. He, and that Alba guy beat Donald McDougall to death with a shoe horse rod. So when you play shoe horses, that big stick that sits in the middle that you try to get the shoe horse on, he pulled that out of the ground and beat Donald McDougall to death with it. Suddenly the legislators didn't care about the sentences of second-degree murders at all. And the Supreme Court ruled that they had taken the game time unfairly, and that's how I got released. So I was released by an order from the state Supreme Court.
So talk about Project 180. They help you after you get out, and even before you get out. Remind us what they do and how it helps. I know I've seen pictures of you with them at their galas. I've been to one of their galas. They meet, if necessary, they meet the prisoner on the bus when he's first discharged, right? And they help him in a number of ways, him or her.
I can't say better things about this program. I really can't. So they begin to filter people before they get out as to which ones they want and which ones they don't. Now, I never had the advantage of Project 180. It didn't exist when I was released in 1998. And I had my own path set up and what I was going to do when I got out. And I was very clear on what my goals were. And however, these guys, it's difficult. The transition is very difficult. We limit many of these people in how they work. And insurance companies won't give people jobs, won't let employers take many people for many jobs. And I got out in 1998. We didn't have the internet to search, every employer didn't get in there and check everybody's name or anything like that. And applications back then said, have you been convicted of a felony in the last 7 years? And the day I got out of prison, the answer to that was no. Mm-hmm. And so I'd been convicted in 8 years. So I pretty much could work any place I wanted within a few. Yeah.
There's something called check the box, which we've been trying to get rid of, which on the application, you have to say whether or not, right, you've been convicted. And some people feel that's unfair.
Of a felony, yeah.
Of a felony.
Right. I think that anything that exists within the marketplace is fair. However, it is a difficult thing to overcome. And when you just say, hey, look, all we're going to do with convicted felons is treat them like slave labor once they get out, maybe you're going to have some bad results. Maybe people are going to rebel against that. And do you want these people who have shown antisocial behavior in the past rebelling? And I say the answer to that is no. I think that we should make available to them as many jobs as possible. Look, sure. I wouldn't put pedophiles at nurseries.
Of course.
However, I do think that somebody who, kited a check at 18 years old at 40 should probably be able to work anywhere they want, including a bank, so long as they've shown, appropriate behavior. I don't think that we, the voting public, we, the democracy, even we, the politicians, none of these people have enough facts that sit in front of them to get involved in the relationship between the employer and the potential employee and decide who's going to be best for which job. Now, I say it's the responsibility of the employer to do the research and find out what they need to find out about a given person and decide. And my employers, in many cases, found out, knew what my charge was, and they decided that I was a good enough employee that they wanted me to be there. And that's a decision they should be able to make.
Right. Another thing, another organization, and by the way, Angela McArdle has joined us. Welcome, Angela. She's a prominent politician, and I had your bio up here.
Well, I'll tell you this. Angela McArdle is the person who made the Libertarian Party relevant.
Yeah, she's the chair. I don't know exactly what libertarianism is. And then I read in Wikipedia, there's a whole bunch of different parts or factions. And so it's a fascinating subject. And you guys could, of course, help explain it. But one more thing.
I got one more little bit of factoid, Tom, that I want to throw out because I think this is so important for the listening public. 0.3%. 0.3%. We would all agree that that is an infinitesimal number and an insignificant number when we think about it. 0.3% of people are found not guilty at trial if you compare them to the set of numbers of people who are arrested, which means that essentially a prosecutor decides the guilt or innocence of an individual. Now, this is, our founding fathers would have literally lopped off heads over a system like this. And, you know, people would have been tarred and feathered. Remember, the redcoats were found not guilty. John Adams, as their attorney, they were found not guilty because they were considered to have acted reasonably. It was better that 10 guilty men go free than one innocent man is incarcerated. 0.3% of people are found not guilty at a trial. And that shows to me that the system has figured out how, over several hundred years, to essentially work its way in and put innocent people into prison. One more fact, about a third of people who actually make it to trial, 1/3 of people who make it to trial are found not guilty. These are people who have been willing, in some cases, to sit in jail rather than take a plea bargain. In other cases, they've done everything within their power to get to a trial because they believe at the very least that they will be found not guilty. Now, I would suggest that probably more than half of them are, in fact, not guilty. But I think that we, the public, have just watched too much CSI, right? There's just, there's clearly, in many cases, a crime that's been committed, and we want a guilty party. And clearly there's some facts if these people are sitting there. But something's broken, and it needs fixing.
I also think our bail system is broken because only the Philippines and the United States have that cash bail system where if you have enough money, you can stay out of prison, keep your job, keep your car, keep your wife and family. But the people who don't have that kind of money or can't afford, and you lose 10% of your bond, you know, the people who don't have the kind of money to get a bail bond have to stay in jail for up to 7-8 months and lose all of the
3 years
or years. There was a guy at Rikers. It's horrible. So most countries don't use our bail system, and I'd like to know if you have any better ideas or what you would see to prefer to see.
Yeah, I would prefer to see trials happen more quickly. Okay. So everybody just says that they waive this right to a speedy trial. Everybody in America has the right to a trial within 30 days. But your attorney will say this is a terrible idea. Why? I don't know. I think it's because he doesn't have the time. He doesn't feel like he has the time to prepare. But the prosecutors have the same lack of time to prepare. And the premise was that we can find something close enough to the truth to have a trial. And I think, I don't know if it's causation or correlation, but what I can tell you is in the amount of time that everybody's waiving the right to a speedy trial, the conviction rate that I was talking about has gone way up. So I think that those things are causative. That's causative. One's causative to the other, but I don't know that they are.
Don't you think we overdo it a little bit? We have more people in prison than any other country in the world. Right?
Oh, I think that's absolutely the truth.
I don't think we have more.
I think that.
Go ahead.
Well, another thing, is that if for whatever reason a police officer, a law enforcement officer, wants to find you guilty of something, they can do it.
Sure.
There's so many things that are illegal at this point. There's a book written called 3 Felonies a Day. Now, I didn't read the book, but I love the title. And it suggests that every American is committing about 3 felonies a day. And it's, fascinating when you start looking at these things. I remember that it was a misdemeanor in the state of New Hampshire to have a puppet show on a Sunday. And, there's just ridiculous things out there. Now, I suspect not many people have been convicted of having a marionette show on a Sunday recently in the state of New Hampshire, but nonetheless, there's just ridiculous things. One thing that I think that's worth pointing out that I'm terrified of is the violent felony called armed burglary.
Okay.
So they call this, right, it sounds bad, right? Like you go into somebody's house with a gun in your pocket ready to shoot anybody, but that's not how it's applied. The vast majority of armed burglars or somebody who went into a house, saw something valuable in the form of a firearm, picked it up, and left. Now, it doesn't have to be loaded for this to be an accurate charge.
Wow.
And so many people are sitting in prison right now for what is called a violent felony, which not so good, and they're there for stealing a handgun. And I don't think that is what the people who wrote that law was the original intent of that law was. I think that was for somebody who came into a house with a gun on their hip ready to shoot anybody that they found.
We've got about 5 more minutes. So, Mark, what are your projects now as a person? Are you a blogger or a speaker? What do you do?
I work on the radio. I do podcast and a little bit of radio still, and happy to do it. It's always fun. But what I'd like to talk about is my work with Project 180.
Yes.
Wonderful people. I'm a donor and a supporter of them. WSLR. I'm a donor to the news organization there because I think that local news is incredibly important, and really nobody's generating it in Sarasota. I work with, to some extent, St. Jude Children's Hospital. Lastly, a really important organization to me is called Foundation of Hope. It's in Jinja, Uganda. With the help of my radio audience, we built an orphanage there and bought them some land so that instead of going on the streets and begging, which is not a particularly productive thing to do in Jinja, Uganda, they can go on their farm and they can grow sugarcane and a variety of other vegetable crops that they can sell in the market or eat, because first thing you got to do with orphans is you got to feed them. Now they have a piece of land and they have a job and they have a marketable skill, and it's really just very rewarding, and we're very happy with what we're able to do. They built a school there on the land, and the kids are getting up to an elementary education so they can read and write and do those sorts of things, and I think that's important. And I'm just really proud of what we were able to accomplish there. I worked with a minister who contacted me many years ago. I'm going to just guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 years ago, and his name is Nafuna Johnson. It's an odd combination of names, isn't it? And he just really had a passion for these kids. He was one of them. He grew up an orphan in Uganda, and these were basically his younger friends, his charges, as it were, his wards, and they were sleeping in a shed when he contacted me. And it took about a year. We managed to use Bitcoin, actually, which my radio program, Free Talk Live, was the first media in the world to discuss Bitcoin. So we used the wealth that was created through Bitcoin to build this orphanage, and I think it has 20 beds or something like that. And not every kid that they call an orphan there is like without both parents. It's just like perhaps not the best parents, right? So it's a place for kids to go, spend the night, get a meal, and if they want, they also have a job built in. There's some school built in. We, raise money from the community and from, Americans to keep the school going. It doesn't cost much to pay a teacher in Uganda, but it does cost. So we do that.
You've been there, obviously.
No, I've never been there.
Really?
I get videos and FaceTimes, and the kids will send me videos of them singing, they know my birthday. I would not have picked.
Well, I hope you get over there to see the good you've done there. I think
it's a plan.
I remember one documentary, death metal in Ghana, but I would never have gone to the center part of Ghana and listened to death metal. But now I know a little bit about about the subject. So thank you, Mark, for all you've doing and going to do, and thanks for the concern for this criminal justice system. And we'll keep working on it.